Tussen bosse en bome, tussen grense wag ons almal vermore. Maar op 18 was ons almal verlore. Hoe kan ons verstaan?
Ons was dienstpligtiges en staande mag, die manne en vroue, die hele SAW en seensbroederskap, wie vanaf die 60er, deur die 70er en tot die 80er jaar op die grens en elders ons mense probeer verdedig en beskerm het. Om die kampvuur gesels ons oor die lag en die huil, die stap en die hardloop, die drill en die marcheer, die oefen en die ontspan, die werk en die speel, die sweet en die rus, die vastbyt en die jiphou, die val en die opstaan, die baklei en die weghardloop, die suksesse en die mislukkings, maar ook die bloei en die doodgaan, die treur en die vroeging en veral die onthou. Ons onthou ons helde en gevalle makkers en die gewone soldate en polisiemanne, van troep tot korporaal tot sersant tot offisier, wit, swart, bruin en geel, wie saam onder die oranje, blanje, blauw gedien het in Suidwest en Angola, in Rhodesia en Mozambique en in Suid-Afrika self. Om die kampvuur vertel ons hulle stories, maar laat ons hulle ook self terugdink en pyns en onthou. Om die kampvuur, aangebied deur Willem Ratte.
En wie weet nou ons leven, want net God alleen weet waar ons bewe, want op 18 wou ons samen net lewe.
Goeienaand luisteraars. Vanaandse program gaan ons weer soos gewoonweg terug na die goeie ou dae, maar hierdie keer nie net Suid-Afrika nie en Suidwest nie, ons gaan sommer Rhodesia toe. Daar die klein landjie noord van ons, waar so baie van ons, veral in die begin toe daar nog nie so baie in Suidwest aan die gang was nie, waar so baie van ons manne en vroue betrokke geraak het. En vanaandse gas is eintlik 'n spesiale gas. En die eerste keer wat ek hom nie die eerste keer wat ek hom gesien het nie, maar die eerste keer wat ek ervaar het wat 'n soort mens hy is, wat 'n soort grapjas hy is, was in die kroeg van alle plekke van die eenheid in Rhodesia waar ons saam gedien het in Salisbury. Die barakke se naam was Cranbourne Barracks, en dit was in die ou barakke, die ou kwartiere, en voordat ons oorbeweeg het daar na 'n nuwe plek naby die lughawe. En die van u wat ook in die weermag was, weet, jy kom gewoonlik in as 'n rekruut, dan beteken jy omtrent niks nie, en dan op 'n dag kry jy jou klere of jou berei, en jy voel nou, jy is nou iemand, jy het nou finaal, is jy nou 'n troepie of 'n skutter, of wat hulle jou ook al noem. Maar dit is niks in vergelyking met die eerste streep wat jy kry. Al die luitenante en offisiere kan maar gaan slaap, maar ek dink die gevoel wat jy het as jy 'n troep is, as jy 'n troepie is, en jy kry die dag jou eerste streep, dit is iets wat jy nooit weer in jou lewe gaan ervaar nie, daai gevoel van, soos in Engels sê, accomplishment. En daarmee saam in ons eenheid het gegaan die jaard. Nou die jaard is 'n ou kanondop, wat dan met bier gevul word, en die arme siel wat nou so goed voel oor hy nou sy streep gekry het, hy moet die jaard nou in een teug uitdrink, of sal ons maar liewer sê uitsuip. En vir 'n ou wat nou nie baie drink nie soos ek, is dit natuurlik iets wat dit het nogal nagevolge. In my geval het dit verskriklike nagevolge gehad, maar die ou wat die jaard volgemaak het, was 'n ou met die naam Torty. Nou hy was op daai stadium, ek dink hy was op daai stadium 'n volkorporaal reeds, en hy was voor in die koor om nou die jaard vol te maak, en dan met 'n gegiggel te kyk, wat gaan nou gebeur, want jy het nie 'n keuse nie, jy moet maar die ding aan jou mond sit, en jy moet nou maar drink. En terwyl jy drink, juig almal, en maar eintlik wag almal vir die groot debakel wat gewoonlik daarop volg. En in my geval, ek weet nie hoe ek het reg gekry het nie, maar ek het die ding toe leeg gedrink, of omtrent leeg gedrink, en onmiddellik hardloop ek na die toilet toe, want nou, wat jy so, op so gewelddadige manier inkry, moet natuurlijk, en gaan natuurlijk dadelik weer uit, en bo uit. So jy sorg dat jy so gauw as moontlik by 'n plek kom, waar jy dan jou gesig daar kan indruk, en dan alles weer van jou afgee. En daar het ek toe klaar gedoen wat ek moes doen, en jy spandeer nog 'n tydjie om totdat jy voel, nou kan jou maag net nie meer nie, daar is net niks oor nie. Maar wat ek toe vergeet, wat ek toe nie aan dink nie, is dat so 'n tydjie voor die tyd, dit was hier so 75, toe ons almal nog jonk en mooi was, so 'n tydjie voor die tyd, was ek by die tandarts, en een van my tande was nie baie goed nie, en hy het toe die tand getrek, aan die manier, as daar iets nie reg is nie, trek hom sommer, en omdat dit een van die voortande was, sit het toe vir my 'n kunststand in, met so 'n plaatjie agteraan. Nou sit die ding in jou mond. En ek het nou klaar my besigheid gedoen, en nou kom ek nou terug in die kroeg. Die kroeg se naam was The Stagger Inn. En natuurlik die hoofseremoniemeester was hierdie selfde Torty, en toe ek nou inkom, toe sit nou 'n gelag van 'n ander wêreld. En ek maak toe die fatale fout. Ek begin toe saamlag, en met die lag toe maak ek nou my bek oop. En toe voel ek, maar hier is so 'n trek hier tussen my tande. En toe besef ek, maar met alles wat ek toe uitgegooi het my tand toe ook in die slag gebly, en het help nog nie om terug te gaan en vir die tand te soek nie. Goed, dis nou ons inleiding in Afrikaans, en ons gas vanaand is Torty, soos ek gesê het, en hy is Engelssprekend, waarskynlik in Rhodesië gebore, maar hy moet nou maar self vertel. Torty, you are our guest tonight, and we want to welcome you and say good evening, Torty.
Good evening, my old friend, with the old being the operative word. How are you, Willem?
Fine, Torty. And we start off with a normal question. How the heck did you end up in the army? You were a nice Rhodesian, I suppose, short, but still a nice Rhodesian. How did you end up in the army?
Oh, it's a long story, Willem. Basically, I left school. I was educated at Churchill School in Salisbury, which is Harare now. And I pursued a career, believe it or not, with the bank. I went to a little dorpie called Umvukwis, close to where the war started, not far from Centenary. I think you remember, you must have gone through there many times, Willem, with us. And after 2 months, the bank manager told me I was unsuitable for banking. So went back to Salisbury, and as you do in those days, went jawling at the Cock Door and Brett's and various nightclubs, grew my hair down to my shoulders when I had hair, and I was a real proper little gobshot. Thought I was a hippie and whatever. And suddenly, in those days, there was a 9 months national service. And suddenly I got this letter in the post at home, which I later found out was my old man, my father, fed up with my long hair and my attitude, enlisted me to the army. Thought that would give me a bit of discipline. So off I went on the train through to Bulawayo, to Llewellyn Barracks, where they did their 9 months national service and hated the shine parades and, you know, all the bullshit and everything. And I thought, no, man, I must get out of this. The SAS came down on a recruiting course, led by Snake Allen, and a guy by the name of Alan Simpson, who was a bodybuilder of note. And I thought, hell, if that's what the SAS looked like, not talking about Snake, I'm talking about Alan Simpson, you know, I wouldn't mind a body like that, you know. This boy looks strong. Little knowing that he was actually in the MT, and that's where he found the time to do all this bodybuilding. So anyway, they did a little pre-selection at Llewellyn, and it was a small route march and a lot of running with pack drill and all that sort of thing. And I got through that, and I thought, oh, this is great. I'll be jumping on the train back to Salisbury, where I can go back to the Cock Door and shape with all the chicks. Anyway, they said not so fast. We arrived at Cranbourne Barracks, and then I started my basic training with the SAS, and thought, you know, you get fitter as you know, you get fitter and stronger and stronger, and I started liking this. You know, the rock climbing, the canoeing, apart from the drill, I hated that, as we all did. But the weapon training I quite enjoyed. And then I went for a selection course, passed selection. And in those days, you had to not sign up for 5 years. It was, voluntary, was regular army, the permanent force. So I thought, hell, I'm going to give this a go. So I signed up. Then I went on all in and got through all in and got my colours in, I think it was 1972, 73. Got my wings, my sand beret, blue belt. And that was about it. And I loved every minute of it. I loved the people around me, the camaraderie, my mates, and we were like one big family. And before I knew it, the war started. I think it was about 1972, 73, around there. And the rest of it is history. Yeah.
Just confirm, Torty, the reason why the bank didn't want you is you were too short to look over the counter.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons, Willem.
All right. Now, this is what I was going to ask next. The war. Until you got your beret and wings, you probably thought this is nice. There's nice army, peacetime army. How did you experience it up to that point? You probably didn't know there was anything coming, or not?
Well, we knew about Op Cauldron, and which was, I think I was still at school when that was on. That was in the late 60s, and there was just border control in those days, just patrolling around the borders and that sort of thing. Which was a good laugh, a lot of game around in the Zambezi Valley and that. And then that I remember it just suddenly hit us. We knew there were infiltrations and that. And we were actually in the area when they hit the first farmhouse at Whistlefield Farm, I think it was. We'd been in the area for 3 weeks. We knew they were there. And a lot of people didn't know that, but we were onto them, and they hit that first farmhouse. In fact, I actually heard it being attacked that night because we weren't far from that. And we were driving around in unmine-proofed Sabre Land Rovers. And then the following morning we followed up, and the RLI were called out to come and sort of help because they hit another farmhouse near Mount Darwin. And they took the same road to this farmhouse and got there just before us in an F-250 and hit a landmine. It was the first sort of fatality, and one RLI guy was actually killed in that landmine. We got there about not seconds afterwards in our Sabre Land Rover, and witnessed the Kazovac, etc. And then it was just. Then we went external. We followed up. I think we killed five terrorists in that group, and then we went. Then we went external after that, and it just got heavier and heavier. And interesting. But I enjoyed every moment of it, Willem. It was every day was a challenge. We lived for the day.
Why this external stuff? A lot of our listeners are probably not aware of the ins and outs of internal, external. Can you just explain?
Well, for quite a while, we had a lot of, there was a lot of intelligence coming through that the camps were in Zambia, Mozambique, and right as far north as Tanzania as well. The odd one in Angola as well. And we'd been on them for quite a while. With the government, we wanted to go and hit them in their camps externally, which was basically our role as SAS, and leave the internal patrolling to the Rhodesian Light Infantry and to the territorials. And it was too political then. And then when we realised our backs were against the wall and the infiltrations got bigger and bigger, then we went initially into Mozambique, Zambia. We canoed across, we parachuted, whatever. sometimes walked through to help the engineers breach the minefields for us. And very interesting times.
Now, these externals, what was your first external? What did you feel like? Now you're leaving your Rhodesian soldier, now suddenly you've got to go over the border into Indian country. What did it feel like?
We heard, a lot of our guys previous to me joining had already been working with the tracking for the Portuguese army in then Portuguese East Africa, which is now Mozambique, as we all know. And they were tracking for the Portuguese. So a lot of them came back with a bit of experience in that, and it was a challenge. Everything in the unit was a challenge. There was no bridge too far, and I was actually quite excited about it. Long times away from home and that, but the more you did it, the more experience you got, and the better chance of staying alive, really. But I loved it, especially the challenge was sometimes enormous, but there was, as I say, there was no insurmountable, in our view, target. I mean, we all had our heroes that we looked up to, and guys who we thought we'd never ever, everybody had used somebody as an example of what they'd like to be, and I think mine was like the late Andy Chait, and I thought if I could ever be like him, I'm going to survive this whole war. But we all know what happened to Andy, and that was the day I realized that we are fallible. But you get that feeling of invincibility, that nothing's going to, always happens to the other guy or somebody else until you get it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But,
Torty,
yeah.
The Portuguese were still, when you passed out, when you became a full troopie and then later corporal and so on and so on. But in the beginning, the Portuguese were still going strong in Mozambique. Mozambique was still our ally. But the tours were sniveling in across the Cabora Bassa Dam, across the Zambezi. And it was before my time, but I heard so many stories about it. Maybe you were also involved, people like Don Kenny left a mark there, and lots of funny stories as well when Rhodesian soldiers actually went into Mozambique with Portuguese approval and got chopped across the Cabora Bassa Dam or the Zambezi. No, the Cabora Bassa wasn't built yet. It
wasn't built then.
That's right. You got chopped.
In those days, our forward base is actually underwater now.
Makombe, yeah.
Sort of the Cabora Bassa, yeah.
And
There was a lot of humor.
Tell us about those ops, because I've heard so much about it, serious or funny. Tell us more about it, because I think it's interesting.
Well, you mentioned Don Kenny, the late Don Kenny now. He was an interesting guy, and I was in his call sign a couple of times, and I remember one particular op. We went across, we called them the island ops. There were these islands in Zambia on Lake Kariba, and the tours were using it as a stepping stone to infiltrate into Rhodesia. So we had in that they were using these islands, so we canoed across and boated across in those Zodiacs with tried to silence the motors with blankets and all sorts, and went and camped on those islands. And in those days, every patrol had a rum ration, which was a little plastic bottle of rum. And we used to love this, in our coffee and that sort of thing. And we went across to this tiny little island, and that was our home for about a month. And we discovered there was a flipping elephant on this island. And the elephant was about the size of the island. We thought, how are we going to share this with this elephant? It kept swimming across every night. So Don said, "Listen, we're just gonna go across the pinnacle, and then and we'll set up our bivvies on the other side of this island." And we had all our rations and that with us. And Don Kenny said, "Who's got the rum?" And that was one of the junior troopie. I've forgotten his name now. And he was near the front of the call sign. He said, "No." He said, "You get to the back." He says, "If anybody if anybody's going to get hit, it's going to be in the front. And he said, and that guy will not be carrying that rum. Because, Don loved his rum. So this guy was sent to the back there. But every night we had to keep moving our position because this damn elephant kept crossing. But that was old Don. Oh, there's so many humorous stories, Willem. I mean, I could tell a few about you, actually.
Yeah, but we get to me later. I wasn't there yet. I was still innocent and not bothering anybody.
Gee, I'm just trying to think, another time was with Billy. We were told we were jumping in, and we didn't know where the target was because, there was a lot of leaked intelligence and that. Where it was coming from, nobody really knows. So we were only briefed once we got to the hangar, and sometimes not even then when we landed. So we knew we were going into Mozambique because it was 10 days rations we took with us and a lot of extra ammo and, claymores, etc., etc. So Billy had this great idea, and I'm sure you hated it too. And 4 o'clock in the morning, they used to kick us out of bed and then jump onto the vehicles and off to the Air Force to go and kit up and then get onto the deck. And Billy says, I hate this waking up. He said, I've got an idea. He said, we'll go to the wing stagger, and he said, we'll drink until, early hours of the morning. And he said, then we'll lie in the back of the vehicle. And that means we don't have to get out of bed. We just put all our kit on and everything. I said, okay, good idea. So we get woken up, everybody's embussing, jumping on their vehicle, and we're just getting trampled from head to foot. What the hell? Off to the Air Force now. Now, they kit us up, and we went, and it must have been the longest flight of my life. You got that bubblers, and you can't, you got that raging thirst. And I thought, I said, Billy, I'm not feeling well. He said, no, me neither. And we had to walk, we had to walk in from where we dropped. We had to walk something like 25 miles, I think it was, with all our kit in the pouring rain. And Billy and I had we'd forgotten to take extra water. But, even if it's raining, I mean, the riverbeds weren't full or anything like that. And we had to get out of that area and into our target area. So it was a whole night with this flipping bubblers. And Billy kept saying to me, he said, we stopped for a 5-minute break. And he said, how much water have you got, Torty? I said, Billy, I'm down to about half a bottle. He said, oh, okay, me too. He said, listen, my mate. He said, I don't know if we're going to reach the target area. He said, I think we're going to die of dehydration before that. He said, but if we die, we've got to die together, all right? I said, okay, deal. So he said, you can't drink more water than I do. He says, we've got to finish our water at exactly the same time. So I said, okay. And we were told that when we hit the camp, not to touch the water in the camp because there was a typhoid epidemic there. Anyway, we get down to 1 cap full of water each. I said to Billy, I'm going to down this whole cap. He said, okay, we'll do it together. And of course, we ran out of water. When we got to the target area, at first light, we called in an airstrike. And we couldn't wait for the contact to get over because we wanted to get hold of their water. And I said to Billy, and there was this whole big 44-gallon drum of water. I said, Billy, bugger the typhoid, I'm drinking this. And we both just stuck our mugs in there and just gobbled this water back. Anyway, nothing happened to us. That same op, and it was funny, we captured the paymaster for Frelimo in that area. And there was this trunk lying there, metal trunk, which we prized open, and it was full of escudos, like millions of notes. Escudo wasn't worth much in those days, but so James Hayden said to me, he was big and strong, and he said, listen, give me all your rats and that. And he said, fill your Bergen up with all this money. And he said, we'll walk out like that. I said, okay, great. Anyway, eventually we get back to Salisbury, and we shared all these escudos. We got a Portuguese guy who was with us to go downtown to the black market, and he changed this into, Rhodesian dollars in those days. And we had a week's R&R, and it was the best R&R of my life. We were taking taxis, we were wining, dining, eating mixed grills every night and whatever. And our 2IC at the time, he later became commanding officer, got wind of this and wanted to know where this money was. And we had to squirm to get out of that one because he wanted to go to troop funds, but it was spent. It was spent. I think it was equivalent of about $7,000 each, which in those days was like a year's pay. We blew it all in 1 week. Cocktail, bricks, whatever. Oh no, geez, that's you know that.
Is that where Billy and yours reputation was established, or was it even before that?
No, you know, I knew Billy from school, and we struck up a friendship right from when I joined. When I joined the SAS, there was the Pink Pig, and I thought, my goodness, if he can make it, anybody can make it. As you know, now Billy became a legend later on, but he's and then we landed up marrying the same sisters. We were brothers-in-law at one stage, and now we live in the same town. So it's quite scary, you know. We've known each other forever. I mean, we went on together, and he knew my family, I knew his family, and we're close buddies. We really are. I can tell you one. If you've got time, Willem, I can tell you this one story of R&R when we went to Kariba.
We got lots of time.
Billy and I and James Hayden, we're sitting in the Wing Stagger. We said, no, we're bored with Salisbury. It was what they called, they used to have Roads and Founders. Remember that long weekend every year?
Yep.
James said, let's go to Kariba. Okay, so we said to the barman, Francis, we said, give us a case of beers. It was a case of warm, we used to drink Lion in those days, warm Lion. And we off in James's Datsun 120. No, we in Billy's Wolseley, that horrible blue thing of his. Now we're off. And we get to Twin Rivers near Karoi, get completely wasted there, get to Makuti, start going down the escarpment, and Billy tore his bumper off, nearly went over the edge of the escarpment. So anyway, we get out to inspect the damage, and Billy forgot to pull the handbrake up. So the car went rolling down the hill, nearly went over the edge. James and I are rolling around in the ground laughing while Billy was chasing this vehicle. Eventually we get into it. We get to Kariba, and there's no accommodation anywhere. So I thought, okay, well, let's just go to Kariba Breezes, which I believe has now been demolished. Something else is there now. Anyway, James says, let's play some darts. So we said, well, they don't have any darts. He said, no, we'll play darts without darts. We said, well, how the hell do you do that? He said, no, Torty, you score, Billy and I'll play. I said, but you don't have any darts. He said, it doesn't matter, we can pretend. Okay, so James says, I'll go first. So he pretends he's throwing a dart. So I mark the double bull. So James says, thank you. Billy pretends he throws. He says, double bull. I said, no, you missed the board. Now we're fighting because this is going on and on. Now I'm taking James's side because he's a lot stronger. So I dropped a glass, and the manager came running up and insisted I pay for the glass, something ridiculous, 25 cents or something, which was a lot of money in those days. So don't be ridiculous, they don't cost that. So he said, right, out. I'm banning all three of you from here. So Billy pushed him through a hole in the wall, and I jumped on top of him, and we're having one hell of a fight. And I'm strangling him with his tie, the manager with his tie. I'm just turning it, and he opened his mouth, and he bit my finger right through to the bone and wouldn't let go. So now the police arrive. They pull me off, and this manager's sister attacked James Hayden. Can you believe it? Punched him in the face. Well, James just looked at it and said, I've never been hit by a woman in my life. Anyway, we get arrested, and we're off in the back of the paddy wagon. The policeman says, James says, no, I want to sit in the front. He said, no, you can't sit in the front. You're under arrest. He said, no, well, then I'm not going with you. So eventually, exasperated, he says, okay, you can get in the passenger seat, and he put the constable in the back, in the bin with Billy and I. So now we're off to Kariba. James keeps taking the policeman's hat off and stuck it on his head. We get up to the charge office. James runs behind the counter. He says, okay, what's the problem? So we're giving James a statement, Billy and I. Oh, no, there was total chaos. So this cop goes and calls the member in charge, and I was smoking a cigarette there. and I didn't see him walk behind me, and as I flicked the ash, it hit the member in charge straight into his eyeball. Oh, we were in big shit then. He went berserk. Anyway, they banned us from there. When we weren't allowed at Breezes ever again. We went to Caribbean Bay to try and get accommodation. We weren't allowed there either. So we went down into the riverbed near Mapani Bay. James said, go right here. And Billy said, but there's no road. He said, just go along the riverbed. I know where I'm going. He said, stop here. We said, we're not going to sleep in the riverbed. It was middle of the winter. He said, no, we'll get out here and we'll sleep. We'll just cuddle up in our sleeping bags. So he says, get out. So Billy and I get out and we get into the boot to get our sleeping bags. James locks the doors, turns the engine on and the heater on. He says, okay, cheers, see you in the morning. So Grant and I outside in this flipping riverbed, freezing. And we wake up in the morning and there's this tour bus, with all those zebra stripes and all these tourists taking photographs of us. Billy Grant and Torty King lying cuddled up next to each other in this flipping riverbed. Jeez. Cut a long story short, that same tour bus, on the way back when we decided to head back to Salisbury, we decided not to take the convoy. And we said, nah, bugger that, we don't need the convoy. So we're off. We get to Twin Rivers, and guys there looked at us and they said, where have you just come from? We said, from Kariba. Yeah? And they said, did you see that ambush? We said, what ambush? And they said, they hit a tour bus. 10 tourists were killed. Ambush. We must have driven straight through that ambush. And I said to Billy, I said, the gooks probably looked at the three of us and thought, and the state of your car, and probably thought, this is, if we take these oaks out, it's not even going to make one difference to the war effort. So they must have just let us go and ruined for a bigger target. So, and they hit the convoy instead. Couldn't believe it. Missed it by 5 minutes. But, I can go on and on. And
these narrow escapes.
Sorry?
No, I just wanted to ask you, that was one narrow escape.
What about all the others you had? You must have had a few narrow escapes.
Oh, jeez. Well, I mean, I got, as you know, I got shot. That was very much a narrow escape. December 76. It was actually December the 22nd, 19. That was actually a very bad month for SAS. We lost 2 guys killed in A squadron, in A troop in Mozambique, and 1 wounded. And on the 22nd near Bangala Dam in the southeast in the Nyajena, I was wounded, and Butnell and Gary Seymour on my left were both killed, shot through the back. That was a bad day. So there was four SAS killed and 2 wounded in the space of a week. It was probably the worst week we've ever had. It was. Then I landed up in hospital with Ian Suttle. He was wounded on that same op with A trip, and we were in hospital for quite a long time together. I think the nurses were quite happy when we were eventually discharged, because we got up to so much shit there. Ian guys used to sneak his Uzo into his room and in the hospital room and that sort of thing. But that was a bad day, Willem. That was that day will never leave me as long as I live, and I live it just about every night of my life. How would I have done it differently? And I've spoken to guys on the ground who patched me up. People like Ken Robertson, old Kruger, and I don't know how I could have done it differently. We had there were 3 of them under the tree, 2 or 3, I think it was 3 under the tree that I went around and fired into likely cover. We were following up on the airstrike, and then the next thing there were bullets whistling past my ear. I spun around, I looked straight into an RPD drum. My arm just shattered, my elbow just shattered, my leg. I felt a round go right through my leg and came out near my bum, and I just ran. It's weird how your training comes in. I just ran. I could rather be a moving target than a static target. So I ran, And I thought maybe I could use the ground as leverage for my left arm. My right arm was just hanging by tendons, and I just ran through a wall of lead. As I got next to him, a round went through my right eye and through the bridge of my nose and cut my left eye open as well. So my right eye was totally ruptured. It was gone. But there again, you get the humour in such sort of. I didn't know Boet and Gary had been shot at that stage, battling to stay alive, and I couldn't see. And even there, you get the humour. Eventually, Ken found me. I was lying on my face, trying to keep still because I didn't know Ken had already killed the gook that shot me, terrorist that shot me, and because I couldn't see, and I thought, I'm trying to fumble for my grenade, which had fallen out of my chest weaving. Then I get turned over, and I thought, she's turning me over, and I was right, it was right in the middle of the crossfire. Could hear the K car firing in the distance and whatever. And then I heard Ken's voice, and he said, "Torty, what have they done to you, my mate?" And I said, "They've shot the shit out of me, Ken. What does it look like?" He said, "Well," and he starts patching me up, and he said, "Do you want to hear the good news or the bad news?" I thought, "Oh, geez, it's a great time for jokes." I said, "Well, Ken, give me the good news." He said, "Well, the good news is you've been shot in the arm." He said, "That's quite a bad one, huh?" He said, "You've been shot in the leg." I said, "I know that." And he said, I said, "Why can't I see?" He said, "You just got a crease mark above your eyebrow." And he said, "Blood's just run into your eyes." He was trying to reassure me. And I said, "And the bad news?" I thought he's going to say, "Oh, you got a bullet in your head as well." He said, "The bad news is your glasses are broken." And he jumped on them, what remained of my glasses, because he thought both my eyes had been shot out, So he thought, I'm never going to need those. So he just crushed them in a fit of rage, And it's weird how you think. I said, "Ken, can you put them in my back pocket of my PT shorts, and I can claim another pair off the army." Not realizing that, geez, that was 2 years of convalescence. But that was a terrible time. That a bad time for my family too, because my father lost both his legs in a landmine the year before that. But it was his strength and his courage and his sheer willpower that pulled me through such a hard time. I mean, he went on to, after getting his prosthesis, and when he came out after they amputated his legs, both his legs, he joined Buster Brown as a gunner on one of his light aircraft. And I said, "Dad, please, man, you've done your bit. What are you doing?" He said, "No, as long as my sons are in this war," he said, "I will carry on fighting it." And he ended up becoming captain of the Rhodesian paraplegic team. He got 4 medals in the South African Games. Amazing guy. He was an inspiration to a lot of people, and especially to me, But, sorry, I'm rattling on a bit, I'm sort of trying to remember as I go,
Not at all, Torty. You carry on.
Oh, no, well, that was it. Then I just, after that, I was in training. I was instructing in training troop and helping with selection courses and that sort of thing. And before we knew it, it was all over, and we were sitting in South Africa. It was just a whirlwind. But I'd do it all again. That's the weird thing about it. The comradeship, we've made friends like you and I, Willem. I mean, that will never, ever leave you. We were like one big family. And I've met friends for life, and that you can depend on, and then you can trust. You never get that anywhere else than such a fine unit as that we served in, I don't know what else.
Torty, when you were in hospital, I've heard stories, okay? Now, I'm going to tell one story, and then maybe you'll remember the other one. I don't know if it was true, but knowing you, it might possibly be true, okay? Only you can confirm it. The first story is, when you were shot up and you were lying in hospital and your one eye is gone, the other one they're struggling to save, your mates, your so-called mates come in at night to visit you and they say to you, hey, Torty, you want to come out tonight? And you say to them, nah, man, look at me, I can't. I mean, geez, I'm all bandaged up, etc., etc. I can't come out with you tonight. You say, well, it's a pity, we've got a blind date for you. Is that true or not?
Yeah, I think that was Grant in his sick humor. But they did sneak me, Ian Suttle and I, out a couple of times. We used to just get hold of the guard commander and order him to bring the Land Rover to come pick us up, and we used to go and jewel. I remember one night, Ian and I were both walking around. We went to Brett's nightclub, and we both had our arms in triangular bandages. We still had, the wounds are still quite severe in it. And they wouldn't let us in because we weren't wearing a tie. Can you believe it? So Ian goes back to barracks with this recruit who was driving us. Get his. I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I just want to know." He said, "And shoot the." I said, "Are you flipping mad?" Yeah. He said, "How can I put?" He said, "I can't even tie a tie with one arm." He said, "How much?" And he said, "You wouldn't even see the tie because I'm wearing a triangular bandage." I said, "Well, let it go, Ian. It's not important." I said, No. Jeez. So we slept in Cecil Square that night, in the rain. Yeah.
With your bandages?
Yeah, oh, God. The plaster cost was buggered, and, oh, God. Yeah. Just to have a...
No wonder the nurses gave up on you.
I remember the one nurse kept giving us a hard time, and she just had a bad attitude, and every morning the nurses used to have this, it was like a shine parade. The matron used to inspect them, that their dress sense was right and they were well groomed and whatever. And this one had a really bad attitude, and so we decided, I think Ian had left, but there was another guy, a policeman who lost his big toe in a landmine incident. So his arms were fine, and I said, "Listen," when she walks past, you grab her. It was just before the inspection. Grab her, hold on to her. I said, "I've got a Cokie pin here, a permanent marker." And I leapt out of my bed with my left arm, and he was holding her, and I drew a moustache on her top lip and a scar down the side of her face and everything, and gave her a little bockboard with this permanent marker, and then leapt into bed, and he released her just before the matron came round. Oh, jeez. And she took one look at this nurse and said, "Are you trying to be funny?" I said, "They did it." She said, "How can they do it? Look at the state of that guy." I said, "Yeah, I mean, I can't." I said, I can't even move. And then Jesus, it was shit, there we go. That nurse wouldn't help us at all after that, I promise you. Had to empty my own bed.
But overall, the nurses, they had some wonderful nurses, didn't we?
Oh, they were amazing. They were amazing, Willem. I mean, there's so many casualties in those wards, and they gave their all. They were really, really good. They very well, very highly trained, very patient, and old Rhodesian stock, can't replace it. But they were good. The majority of the nurses are very, very exceptional. Yeah.
And the hospital and the doctors were also tops.
Oh, well, I mean, I look at Standish White, who operated, funny enough, on my dad's legs and my elbow, my right elbow. He was one of the top orthopedic surgeons in the world at the time. And I believe that during the Vietnam War, he consulted on a lot of their orthopedic injuries. That's how he was one of the top in the world. Very good. Remember, his nephew landed up in the SAS.
Was it? I thought it was his son. Was it his nephew?
I think it's his nephew. Yeah. He was an exceptional surgeon. Exceptional. Yeah.
Yeah. Read about him a lot.
I mean, even all of them. I mean, the skin grafts and the skin care ward were unbelievable. I mean, they really were. I mean, for example, a lot of my injuries were experimental. A lot of my skin grafts were experimental. They replaced my eyelid from the back of my ear and dropped a pedicle to replace the bridge of my nose from my forehead. replaced my forehead from skin from the inside of my arm, and a lot of them were actually trial and error, and he succeeded. And there was a guy by the name of John Davey. They were very good. I remember a pilot in the ward next to me. He was burnt on 95% of his body. He went down in a trog, or was it I've forgotten which aircraft it was, but he was terribly burnt. And they had to start. The only part of him whether it wasn't burnt was his right cheek, his backside, and they had to start with a skin graft from that. And eventually, I saw many years later, and they did an unbelievable job. But my God, this guy went through hell, absolute hell. But I saw him, and they did an amazing job. They really did. It wasn't perfect, but he landed up getting married, children, and everything. Oh, they did some really unbelievable stuff.
You were talking about Rhodesians. Rhodesians, you were born there. You and Billy were born there. Now take you to your families. How far does it go back? Just to tell the listeners, because people forget, Rhodesia is now gone. Nobody thinks about Rhodesia anymore. It's now Zimbabwe and Mugabe and all that. But there was a Rhodesia there. There were Rhodesians. There were those people got there, and they were there. For example, your families, where did they come from? When did they get to Rhodesia?
Well, my father was born in Johannesburg, actually. And my mother was born in Bulawayo. And my father and his sister was born in Salisbury, but his two brothers and him went to CBC in Kimberley, and then my grandfather decided to immigrate to Rhodesia, and they were schooled at Prince Edward School, and stayed there, and had two uncles who farmed. My mother's brother was farming brother-in-law was farming in tobacco farming in Karoi, Tengwe area, and my uncle Keith, my dad's brother-in-law from his sister, he was farming in Macheki, in the Macheki area, but they both had their farms taken away. Mugabe took their farms away. But we had a lot of stock, a lot of South African stock in Rhodesia too. I mean, you remember Enkeldoorn and that, the Republic of Enkeldoorn? Yep. Very, very Afrikaans. A lot of I could guess you could say Rhodesian stock was a mixture of South African and British, really. From the pioneer days. Billy's parents were Scottish, but he was born in Salisbury. That's why English was the first language. Although a lot of people never spoke English in places like Enkeldoorn. It was very Afrikaans, but very friendly people, and it's all. I don't know. I mean, like a Rhodesian accent is a Rhodesian accent. It's quite distinctive from a South African accent. A lot of people say that, although I haven't really noticed. Yeah.
Well, take Redcliffe in the middle of Rhodesia. My late wife and Andre Skeepers and Jupes, they were basically Afrikaans, as you said.
Absolutely, yeah. But we at school we had you had a choice of two languages. I know at Churchill School it was French or Afrikaans. I tried Afrikaans, but for somehow it was very difficult for me to pick it up, and I don't, I'm not fluent at Afrikaans at all, even though I've lived for more than 30 years in South Africa. It's for the simple reason at that age, we never had to use it. Everything was in English. We wrote in English, we studied in English, and nobody around us spoke Afrikaans. I think when you're a kid, you can pick it up quite easily, but when you get older, a fossil like you and I, it's very difficult to pick up. And when I left South Africa, I was in Durban for a long time, and a lot of people mainly speak English there as well. Now, I wish I could speak Afrikaans fluently. where I live now, there's a lot of Afrikaans spoken.
Yeah, PE is but Torty, you explained about your Rhodesian background, etc., etc. And now, I mean, let's just say it. What's left now? I mean, all these people, all these wonderful people going there, and everything that was done there, built up, etc. What is left now from your family, for example? Who's left?
My uncle and aunt who lost their farm. They live in a little flat in Borrowdale, up in Harare. I've got a cousin who's still farming up there, but most of them are all either in South Africa, in Australia, or the UK. A lot of most have immigrated. You can't live there. You can't survive. You don't even know if your money's in the bank. You know, it's just terrible what's happened there. It's an absolute disgrace. Yeah.
How do they cope? How does your uncle and aunt cope?
They live off their kids. That's where it's come to. You know, they live off their children. You know, the children supply help them financially. You know, from being one of the top tobacco growers in the country to being financed by your kids. It's backs to the wall. When you get to that age, how do you start again? You can't start again. Not when you're in your 70s. You know, in your 70s and your early 80s, it's impossible. You know. Yeah. A lot of farmers actually went to Zambia as well, and I believe a lot of them are doing very well.
You mentioned after your encounter with those tours under a tree, and you ending up in hospital, and eventually you recovered, amazingly enough, to further entertain the squadron. And they packed you off to training troop, like I was packed off myself at some stage. And you must have had some interesting stories that you saw during selection as well.
During selection? Well,
yeah. Tell us about selection.
Oh, selection was that was hard. My instructor was Snake, and you know what a sadist he was.
Well, that was another question. You might just as well do him first and tell us about Snake.
Yes, you go through all of that, and I thought I was doing pretty well in selection, and then we had the route march, that dreaded route march. We had to walk to, I think it was from Pungwe to the top of Mount Inyangani, and then back. And I had Snake Allen following me in his Land Rover. Get in the back, you failed. You're never going to make it. You're too short. You're too bloody ugly. Get in the back. All the flipping way to the foot of Mount Inyangani. And that made me determined. I thought, bugger it, I'm going to get through this. And I did. But the other funny thing was your selection. Well, you're all in. Remember?
Yeah, I remember that well.
Daryl and I caught you. That was the hardest thing of my life, trying to pin you down. And you're about twice my height. And Daryl says, hold him. Remember when we captured you on the top of Mount Inyangani?
Yes, I do.
Jeez. And I thought, how the hell am I going to hold on to old villain? But jeez, and I managed to get you. I think I've managed to get you off balance for a while until the rest helped me. We bundled you took you down to and stuck your head under the water at the Pungwe River. Am I right?
Yep.
And I think we drowned you, and we had to pump you out again.
I nearly been drowned that day.
And Snake Allen strung you up by your thumbs in that concentration camp that he made.
Yeah.
I don't know how you survived that villain, but we tried to break you and we couldn't. There was no ways. And I think that everyone had a massive amount of respect for what you went through. I've never seen anybody tortured like that in my life. We couldn't get a squeak out of you. And then we landed up in the same call sign for about 2 years, eh? You, me, and Mike Cummings.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember that first op with Daryl across the river when he chased us off. When we went on one copy after the other, and every time we think that now we can rest a while, he chased us off again.
Jeez, oh God. It was hard to keep up with him, wasn't it? I think that was the fittest we ever were. Jeez, and then we hit, and that was all instinct, on Daryl's part. Forget about all the fancy night vision goggles and all that. We'll just hit them in the day. And we had to, it was quite a successful op that. No. I could not have experienced with Daryl, and now we had good times, Jeez, we had good times. It's time goes on. I'm just trying to remember all these things now. It's some things stick in your mind, but it's trying to remember dates now and names now that getting a bit sort of hazy. Not that I'm old.
No, you're not.
We've had a good life, Willem.
Yeah. What time did you? When did you decide this is it? We've lost Rhodesia. You're now going to come down to South Africa.
Willem, the day that they announced that Mugabe had taken that ZANU-PF had taken the polls, I thought, what's the point? I mean, everything that we fought for is now gone. And I could, he wasn't to be trusted then, even though the British government trusted him implicitly. We knew what a snake he was, and look at it now.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, we fought this bastard, and they put him in power, and now they're won. Now it's all this and that. But why did they put him in power in the first place?
I think I think we were a huge embarrassment to them. When as Ian Smith said, we never lost the war. We were let down by our friends, and we just, I don't know. It's just shattering. If they left Ian's, if they, those talks and that, we'd still be there. We'd still be having a wonderful life there. I mean, it is just, we were just, at the end of the day, we were just a pawn in a big political game. That's all we were. And it's sickening that so many people lost their lives because of these bloody politicians.
Yeah, but they fought for a good cause. A lot of people in South Africa as well, they say, but what did we fight for? I believe we fought for the right thing. That we were stabbed in the back wasn't our fault. It's one of those things that happened.
No, we did. We did our duty to our country and our unit to our best ability. We kept our families alive, and we fought for the country as a whole. We fought for our freedom, and did a fine job at the time. But at the end of the day, we just ran out of bullets. We ran out of manpower. We just the country ran out of money. We couldn't sustain that war any longer, unfortunately.
But if South Africa had not turned around under Foster, if South Africa had become involved sooner and done more, don't you think we would have been able to carry on?
Oh, yeah, definitely, Willem. Yeah, definitely. An extended period. Do you trust a politician? I mean, really? It's just it was just when they withdrew all their aircraft and the guns and that. I mean, we paid for every bullet from the Rhodesian budget. You know that in that war.
Yep.
But I mean, we just couldn't sustain it. Without South Africa, we were finished. We couldn't get it anywhere else. It was just actually amazing that we managed to carry on as long as we did. Sanction busting and that. I don't think there's any country that can do that. It was unbelievable.
Well, what was done was actually unbelievable. When you think back, and even now, so many years afterwards, when the stories you hear, what was done, what was achieved, it's incredible, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, we were exporting. We were exporting food during that war. We had the best tobacco in the world. We had the best beef. and we were exporting and sneaking it through, and that's what paid for the war effort. It's just at the end of the day, Willem, we were just overrun. But we never lost the battle, but we were just overrun, and we were just. I think every man would have fought till the last man, but they just gave the country away. I just still can't believe it.
Don't you think the auxiliaries were a solution? At one stage, I remember in my recruits course, one of the things that stuck in my mind was a story of Sipholile, where I don't know who it was it Moose or someone? Anyway, at the end of recruits course, you get a briefing of what the situation is like. And at that briefing, they told us about Sipholile, which was a tribal trust land there on the escarpment north, facing the Zambezi Valley. And they told us that in the beginning, the first incursions, these locals were so on side, they covered the spoor up. It rained, and they covered the spoor up and went and fetched the police and said to them, here. And some even went so far as to poison the tours that came in. And the next morning they went to the police and said, pick up the 2 bodies. And then the chief of Sipholile apparently, this is how I remember it, he went to the government, the Rhodesian government, and said, listen, every time we find something or want to do something, we've got to run off to the police. Give us weapons. Let us be armed. There's enough youngsters here who we can arm, and then we'll do the job ourselves. Trying to think back to at the end of our recruits course when the story of Sipholile was told, and the chief basically said to the Rhodesian government, listen, we can save you a lot of hassle. Just give us weapons, and we'll defend ourselves. And the Rhodesian government at that stage did not want to do that. And then later in the war, in the late 70s, someone had the right idea, and they started the auxiliaries, arming locals who were on sides or wanted to be on sides. And that sort of, as far as, okay, there's a lot of propaganda about it. Obviously, the other side didn't want this to succeed, but and there were a few mishaps as well, but still, don't you think if something in that line had been done sooner to arm more of the local pop, that it would have turned out better?
It's a difficult one, Willem. In certain areas, yes. You certainly couldn't do that in places like the southeast, along the Angwa and that, in the Nyajena and that. They were rabid. But certain areas, yeah. Sipholile, a lot of them had their own little farms, and some of them were growing burley tobacco and that, and exporting it. And there were a lot of friendlies up that side, actually. And I think maybe, it could have worked. We could have experimented with it. And parts of Matabele land as well. I mean, that's where most of the RAR came from, as you know. But certainly not in the southeast, never, ever. The southeast was just at Malseta. There was a really, really bad areas. But Sipholile, Sipholile, Ditito, places like that. Perhaps. Going
back to South Africa, I don't know if you remember in the Troopies mess, just before the internal settlement, or just before Ian Smith was forced into the internal settlement, which also could have turned out well. But anyway, it must have been about 77, round about when South Africa put the screws on Rhodesia to force them into accepting majority rule. Ian Smith came around. Apparently, every unit, but he came to ours. He spoke at the Troopies mess. Do you remember that?
Willem, I think I was still in hospital then, because I was in hospital for about 2 years after I got shot. I was in and out,
Yeah,
I don't remember that, but I believe he did go.
You must have heard about it. He stood there, and before the time, there's a lot of guys saying, he's selling us out, because by that time, the news had come through that we got to accept majority rule, blah, 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 and so on. And a lot of people said, but this is not what they're fighting for, and so on, and so on. And then Ian Smith himself came right into the Troopies mess and spoke to us, and he explained that we only got a few friends left, And those friends have told us, you must. And he had no choice, and I remember his words. He said, now we are going to try and make the best out of a bad situation, which he did. I mean, when you look back, that election, for example, which another thing I wanted to ask you, you were there at the election, I think it was 79, wasn't it? The internal election, and then later let's call it the Mugabe election. But the first, the internal election. What do you remember about that?
I remember, 2 days before it was announced, the word was going around that we'd actually lost the election, that Mugabe was in. I know I was secretly, like a lot of us, were secretly hoping that walls would have allowed the units to complete their tasks, as far as taking the upper hand. But I just think how do you the British should have seen that whole election was rigged. It was rigged right from the beginning. There was intimidation on a massive scale. They were torturing and killing tribes, and they just turned a blind eye to it all. It was absolutely it was an absolute disgrace. The monitors were obviously briefed beforehand, no matter what, majority rule. And it was just, what do you do? Go down to greener pastures, which we thought would be, South Africa, and you can't. You got to get on with your life, and it's at that stage it was advisable to move on, as hard as it was, and leave everything behind and start again. And here we are.
Before we get to that,
carry on.
No, I hear you, Torty. Before we get to that, starting again, because there's also something I want to ask you about. Back in Rhodesia, you mentioned at one stage Francis the barman. Now, I wasn't such a popular member of the Stagger-in
Wing Stagger.
Wing Stagger, yeah. We had another one based on that we call Stagger-in Wing Stagger. But Francis the barman was a character. Tell us about who he was and especially how it turned out in the end.
Well, he was. Sometimes we wouldn't allow him to close the place, and he had to sleep behind the bar. And quite often we used to get him pissed, and we used to just help ourselves. But we always managed to. If you had no money, he always opened up a tab for everybody. And he had that assistant Billy. He used to go and get himself, go down to the mess and bring our food and whatever to the bar. I remember James Hayden used to say he was particularly scared of James Hayden. James used to point to the swimming pool, even though he couldn't swim. He said, get into the pool. And he used to jump into the pool and sink to the bottom. We had to dive in and pull him out again. But Francis turned, a lot of rumors that he was actually an agent, that he was actually an agent for ZANU-PF.
That was never proved.
It was never proved, Philip, and the guys never spoke about ops in the bar anyway. We never. That was an unwritten rule. You never spoke about ops in a bar, especially in front of the barman. But he was very patient, but he had good humor at times. He just used to. He didn't get much sleep when we were on R&R, that's for sure.
I can imagine that. And then you all came down to South Africa, and a lot of people then, some started in the South African Army. Why didn't you didn't join the South African Army, did you?
Yes, I did. I was on the bluff.
So you were there with, what was it called, 6th Commander?
6 Recce, yeah.
6 Recce.
Yeah.
And what was it like?
Look, we were well received, and we were grateful for the opportunity, but it was a crazy situation, because I don't think that they realized that most of the unit couldn't speak a word of Afrikaans, not a word. And I mean, we had Brits with us, we had a lot of Rhodesians, obviously, South Africans who knew the language anyway, but there was some French, Brits, Americans, and you can't teach an old soldier new tricks, put it that way. You can't teach, they tried giving us Afrikaans lessons. Everybody was pretty demoralized from the Rhodesian scenario anyway. And we just wanted to get back into action and prove ourselves in the South African war effort, and fight for the values that we always had in that. Instead, we started, we're having Afrikaans exams, Afrikaans lessons in that. And you pick that up, as the time goes and that sort of thing. But we wanted urgently to get back into action, to get fresh again, keep your mind going. And I enjoyed it. There were some fine guys and some fantastic soldiers that, from one recce, which we were attached to. Some brilliant guys, as you well know, and they've often operated with some very good, fine operators, and some of them are still friends of mine today. But we were just, some guys stayed behind, but most of us left and decided, let's just give it a bash in Civvy Street, try and start little businesses and that sort of thing. The spirit was gone, put it that way. Now, you remember how small the SAS was. It was a family, and that it was just split. The spirit was gone totally. I tried my hand in the commercial world. I was a rep for Corribrick for 7 years. Then I tried my own business. Ran a paving company and dabbled in various other things, and then went back to my roots and went into the private security field, in Sierra Leone, in Iraq and Afghanistan recently. So, and a little bit of work in the offshore oil industry off Tunisia on a DSV, but
Before we get to that, Torty, I still want you to tell us something about Sierra Leone and so on. But at six recce, you were called six recce. You had one in Durban, two was the Citizen Force, and then you had 4 and 5, 4 in Saldanha Bay and 5 in Palabova. And then the Rhodesians, the ex-Rhodesian SAS was called 6, and I think the Tourist Scouts was called 7, is that right?
No, Scouts were 5. We never had a 7 recce. I'm sure they were subscribed to 5.
Okay, it doesn't matter. But at that stage, in that year sometime, there was an operation launched into Maputo. Were you part of it?
I was part of the aborted raid, but the second one I didn't go on. No, this is when Ian Suttle was killed, and Jim Fox, and I was part of it in the first one. And then it was aborted, and then a few weeks later the guys went in all the way. That was another loss. That was quite demoralising too.
It was a bit of a tragedy.
Very much so. It was a successful op, but to lose good men like that, it's not right. I mean, Ian, for all he went, I mean, he's incredible. I mean, remember he was wounded at Rambonai in Mozambique in the Rhodesian War. Yeah. Then he hit that landmine with Billy and them when they left the army, and then he died near Maputo.
So many good guys lost. Now, when you, as you said, dabbled in Civvy Street, and then eventually you ended up with private security, Sierra Leone. There was another guy, if I remember correctly, that died from the squadron in Sierra Leone.
Yes, a couple of years ago, Blackwater fever. That was old Smithy. Smith. What was his first name again? Yeah, he got malaria, which turned into Blackwater fever, and he died in Durban Hospital. He was Casovac and died in Durban Hospital. What was his first name? Smith was his surname.
Yeah.
But I was, when I was in Sierra Leone, it was after the war. I was CSO, Chief Security Officer for Sierra Rutile mine, which is in the southwest of Freetown, and it's a titanium mine. I was running about 290 guards and 1,000 kilometer concession. That was before came back and then went to Europe. Yeah.
Now these jobs, these security contracts, why did they take Rhodesians and South Africans? Well, I mean, Sierra Leone is probably closer to Europe, or it's not so far away. Why South Africans and Rhodesians?
Well, I was invited to come there by an ex-Rhodesian who'd already been there, and he wanted me to come and help him because the concession was opening up quite dramatically, and he needed a hand. And how he came about it was through an ex-policeman, ex-Rhodesian policeman actually, who got the contract there as CSO. But then they didn't like him, so his mate he now lives in Durban. He took over as CSO, and then he asked me to come up and give him a hand, and then he resigned, and I ended up becoming CSO. And then they sunk one of a $30 million dredge that they were working on, and they had to cut back on expenses. So the first thing they do is they retrenched the security manager, which is crazy. Anyway, I was retrenched from that because they had to cut down on all the expenses and everything. And the first thing they look at is security, because we were, the theft level was massive there. There was a huge amount of theft, and diesel, oil, and anything. A lot of poverty there, and I left, and the theft went through the roof. But I'm not having sleepless nights about it. Yeah.
It's funny that all these countries, I mean, they've been independent since 1960 or till from the 60s onwards. All these countries have been independent, and when they need someone like that, they go and shop overseas for it, or in South Africa for it. Doesn't that tell you something?
Oh, because the corruption is unbelievable there. Jeez, they need people who've got good experience, who've got integrity, and are totally anti-corruption. Yeah, and they need people who can think on their feet. And experience, security experience is good to have today. Especially on a mine. We weren't armed on there. We weren't allowed any arms. They de-armed everybody at the end of the war. So it was particularly difficult to get the trust of the locals. And it's funny, we seem to have a knack for that. You get them on your side and half your battle is won, especially when you don't have any arms. I got on very well with the locals in the confession. They had a huge amount of respect for me.
Tell me, Torty, Sierra Leone, how does it compare to Afghanistan and Iraq? You mentioned you were in all three. How do they compare to each other? Is it exactly the same problems and so on, or is there a difference?
Oh, well, I mean, the terrain is certainly different. We know that. But Sierra Leone is actually a very beautiful country. It's tropical rainforest area. It's right on the Atlantic. It's good fishing. Poverty is unbelievable there still today. It's corrupt. Afghanistan, as we all know, is one of the most corrupt nations in the world. Iraq, the same. Who knows where Iraq's going? I was, when I was in Iraq, that was in, when did I go there? I was there from 2004, 2006. But the people are different. I think if you look at all three, if you compare all three, the people in Iraq seem to have, I felt, I was down in near Basra in the south. I think they were more of a higher intelligence in Iraq. Although in Sierra Leone, a lot of them speak very good English because they're still on the sort of English, the British curriculum, the O-levels. They do O-levels at school and that sort of thing. Afghanistan, who knows where that's going. There's some fine people in Afghanistan, but it's very, very tribalistic. Nobody is to be trusted. Corruption is massive there. Theft is massive there. They will just change sides at a whim. Whoever's winning and whoever's in their favour, that's who they will support. Simple as that. And you got to understand that when they were invaded, a lot of jobs were created for them. It's basically a false economy now with all the troops withdrawing, etc., etc. They're going back to poverty again, and the Taliban are getting stronger. And I don't think anybody's really won a war in Afghanistan, to be quite honest. Alfred the Great was defeated there. Iraq is another story. I mean, we know what's happening with ISIS, etc., etc. But they seem to be pulling their lives together. The army seems to be getting more professional. But who knows? It could change. Could change next week. Look what nearly happened in Turkey the other day. Sierra Leone is so poverty stricken, and they depend on aid, a lot of aid, still to this day. It's like Sudan. I mean, once you start just giving money away, it creates a false feeling that the world will help us. So, I mean, why even try? We're going to get bailed out anyway, which is the wrong way of approaching it. This is what they did to Ethiopia, remember? Yep. This bloody idiot Bob Geldof, just throwing aid at them isn't going to help them.
What's going to happen there, Torty? What do you think? What's your personal opinion? You've been to all three. What's going to happen in Iraq and Afghanistan? It's so, to someone who wasn't there, it's so confusing. What do you think?
Look, Afghanistan it is so. Afghanistan is totally landlocked. It's surrounded by, I think it's 6 countries. Okay, you've got Pakistan, you've got Iran, you've got Tajikistan, you've got Uzbekistan, you've got China. It's totally landlocked. There's so many different tribes, and there's a lot of there's no definitive borders. Are you with me? The terrain in some areas is it's almost impossible to walk across. The infrastructure is not too good, and they're born with an AK in their hands, basically, and they'll fight and they'll keep fighting and keep fighting and keep fighting until they get what they want. Who knows what they want? A lot of them want peace now. They're tired of war, but it can change tomorrow. It was pretty well. I left 2 years ago, but it was pretty well controlled when Stanley McChrystal was there. Definitely, when they had the special forces operating, he made a massive difference. And Stanley McChrystal was a general. He was a most highly respected, one of the most highly respected men I've ever seen. And they booted him. Obama booted him. They were just going backwards. So, God. It's a mess. It really is a mess. But and there's nothing of value in that country, really. There's nothing of value. There's oil in the north and whatever, but it's inaccessible. You cannot get there. You cannot get it to. There's a lot of old Russian oil wells there which can be revived in that. But how long can you defend that for? How much security are you going to need there? They've got. The opium the opium is a massive problem there. I mean, kids are born with, mothers rub heroin on their kids' gums to stop them from crying. So they're addicts at birth, basically. A lot of drug addicts there. And I mean, Taliban are all, they've tried to eradicate the poppies, and they can't. It's, 70, I think it's now 80% of the world's heroin comes from Afghanistan. They've tried replacing it with, other crops and that, but they're not getting, the farmers are saying, oh, no, we like our poppies because we get good return on it. We're getting good money for it. So you're never going to stop that. The drug trade is massive there. Huge, huge, huge. In Iraq, it's a different story. You've got oil. Oil is a big problem in Iraq. As long as you've got oil, you're always going to have wars. Sierra Leone used to be diamonds, but that's very well controlled now. It's a very fertile country, but, there's nothing of value that is really exported. Rutile, okay, a bit of, titanium, yes. There's steel. I think London mining was one of the biggest mines that they've collapsed. Also there again, you've got your corruption levels. All three of those countries are full of corruption.
Now, Torty, a lot of us. Let's use the word us. A lot of us are old fossils. Okay. Now, these old fossils are still going overseas, working in all sorts of countries like the Middle East and Africa and so on. Why? I mean, and how are you received? I mean, you are Rhodesian, a lot of South Africans as well. We are supposed to be the big racists and blah blah blah. And here you work all over the world. How do the locals see you? Do they ever know of Rhodesia? They probably don't.
Most of them have never heard of it. They've never ever heard of Rhodesia. I mean, you'd be amazed at how many Americans have never heard of Rhodesia. Oh, what's that? Where's that?
Yeah, we know that.
Zimbabwe. And then a lot of them think that Zimbabwe is actually part of South Africa. And I've got to explain to them, no, it's not. They're two different countries. Yeah, but it's on, it's on the northern border. They're totally divorced. And no, nobody's ever. I mean, Rhodesia is a memory. I mean, especially people have never heard of it.
But how do old fossils like you do there? How do you do there? I mean, you are probably older than other guys from America and Britain. How do you do, and how does it go? Have they got a good reputation?
No, I think it's experience. You get streetwise. If you've been in security and military and security and worked with a lot of locals and that, you get a feel for it. I mean, you must know it's like with 3-2. You get to know them, and you got to earn that respect. And I found that, even in the Rhodesian War, you earn respect. You've got to look at their culture. You study their culture. You honour their sort of lifestyle, and you acknowledge the fact that they are different to you, and never ever look at them as they think, he hasn't got a brain in his head. They do, very much so. A lot of them are very intelligent, although to us, who are educated, we assume that they are not intelligent because they can't communicate properly with us. But if you honour their culture and you acknowledge it, and you show politeness, and you show strength and resolve, and the ability to think ahead and think for them to get onto your side, it's a piece of cake, and it helps you all the way through. I found this very much so. In Sierra Leone, I had, my guards followed me to the end of the earth. And I was free and fair with them. And they acknowledged the fact when they were disciplined. I used to train them, militarily, and put a sense of pride into them. They had to be smart. Their boots had to be polished. They had to be alert. I used to check on them, and I think they found a lot of respect because I used to patrol at night and check on them. They thought, okay, well, he's not just sitting in the pub and getting pissed and sleeping. He's keen on the job too. And so they used to give me a lot of their support and respect in return. I had an enormous amount of respect from them. And they had, especially in Sierra Leone, the fact that Rhodesia and I said, well, I live in South Africa, which is a fact. They've got a massive amount of respect for South Africans, for what they did, how they helped them in that war. When EO took out the rebels, massive amount of respect for South Africans, huge. Yeah.
Wasn't one of our captains killed there quite tragically? What was his name again? He was an A troop.
Bob McKenzie.
Bob McKenzie, wasn't he killed there as well?
He was killed there. Yeah, that was before. I think just before EO came in. He I actually drove past the place he was killed. He was killed in a place called the Malal Hills, chasing some rebels, and called in an airstrike. And the Nigerians were doing an airstrike, and they hit the wrong. I heard they hit the wrong target, and he walked into an ambush, and most of his guards ran away, left him behind. He was wounded, and he was shot through the back and the back of his legs. And there was a British guy with him who refused to leave Bob. He was mortally wounded, and he was never seen again. Both of them were killed. Bob. He had a lot of successes when he first went in, because he had this habit apparently of just driving through ambushes, and the rebels totally unawares, and they didn't like this. But that was Bob.
Talking about heroes, you said in the beginning, when you started your career in the army, you had heroes that you look up to. You mentioned Andy Chait, but there were others as well, hey? There were quite a few guys that we all looked up to, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Andy was, I thought, the ultimate. And when Andy died on that op in Mozambique in March 77, I was absolutely shocked. I just thought a guy that professional going down, and it was just unfortunate that he got a bullet through the femoral artery. It was just seemed so unfair. And that's the day I thought. There were others, yes. I mean, we operated with Daryl for a long time. He was an exceptional tracker, exceptionally fit, and he had very good knowledge of the bush. Others, some of our officers, I remember the late Martin Pierce, who I thought was a brilliant soldier and tactician, and our last commanding officer, who we've all got a huge amount of respect for. There were others. There were so many good soldiers, Willem. There really were. It's hard to single out, but people who did stand out were people like Andy. And I thought Andy would have been commissioned, before he died. But I believe he did go on a POC course, but he was too much of an individual to continue the course. I actually feel quite guilty about Andy, because I was one of the reasons that he came back to the army, to the SAS, because he'd done his 5 years, and he went to Joburg. I think he was born in Joburg, and he had a little private detective business going there. And I went down on my leave, and he said, how things are going? I said, Andy, geez, I said, this war's hotting up. I said, you should come back. We need you, people like you there again. And when I got back off my leave, there was Andy cleaning his weapon outside the armory, back in his uniform. I was chuffed. Then he died shortly after that.
Yeah.
So, there were others. There were a lot of legends. A lot of. Just trying to remember. Yeah. You, of course, in your own right, was a legend, Willem.
No. You. I was just going to say, you became a legend as well after your contact, the way you recovered and so on. But which brings me to, our time's running out, and you only got 10 minutes left, or quarter of an hour left, for something I've been waiting for, and that is your funny stories, because between you and Billy, I've never laughed so much in my life sometimes. Remember that time you went to Kariba with a certain Graham, you, Billy, and him, and other adventures? I think you can share them with our listeners.
Oh, jeez, God, he. Jeez, I'm trying to get. Yeah, one of the funny ones was our second in command at the time. I will not mention his name.
No names, no factor.
He always used to prefer to drink in the winged stagger, in the corporals club, rather than the officers' mess for some reason, because he loved the humour, and I think it's because we always had all the hot chicks in the winged stagger, Anyway, an order came out by the adjutant that the winged stagger was to be closed at 10 o'clock every night, So, and anybody who disobeys this order will go on orders. So, okay, fine. So we're sitting there, and Francis, the barman, says, okay, I've got to close. So he closes at 10 o'clock. So second in command said, oh, geez, do we have to go all the way back into town now? I said, no, I know how to get in. So I climbed in through the roof, through the back, and opened up the doors from the inside. So we're pinting away. We drinking beer and just writing whatever on the tab. And so eventually we must have made a bit of a commotion. The guard commander had a look through the window and he wrote it down in his report. So the next morning, Billy and I called down to the adjutant's, to Snake's office. He was SSM then, Squadron Sergeant Major. Ken Grant, he said, you know the rules. He said, I'm taking you to the adjutant now. And he said, you're going to be dealt with. So we go on orders, left, right, into the adjutant's office. And he said, you guys know the rules. He said, I'm sending you to and he said, I know that the 2RC was there as well. Because we ended up sleeping under one of the flags. So we thought, this is happy days. Now, they can't charge us without charging him. So Billy and I, we got the smirk on our faces, and the troopy comes running up and he says, the 2RC wants to see you in his office. So we walk in there with a smirk on our faces, and he shits all over. He says, you know the rules in this. You know that stag is not supposed to be open until after 10 o'clock. And what were you drinking at that time? And we looked at him, and I looked at Billy, so I can't believe this. But we said, but you were there. He said, yes, but nobody else has to know that. He said, Sergeant Major, go and deal with him. And we flipping landed up confined to camp for the next week. Yes, I was pissed off. At the time, we went with him to Kariba. God, we landed up sleeping in this tin hut. An ex-SP boy, he was I think he was running Kariba Breezes, and we wouldn't let him sleep at all. Then the one night he chased Billy and I around Breezes with this big stick, and we're hiding behind this table, and he climbed up. There was this tree, and there was a lone pawpaw on the top of the tree. So he grabbed this pawpaw and threatened Billy. Says, duck. I said, he'll never hit me here. And this pawpaw hit me right on the head. I don't know, it was the luckiest shot I've ever known in my life. And I said, Billy, you can't win with this guy, can you? Anyway, he wouldn't, when we left Salisbury, I'm going around in circles now, Billy and I jumped into the back of the seat with a case of beers and we said, okay, drive. I said, no. We said, drive, you driving? It's your car. And he said, give me a beer. We said, no, you can't drink and drive. So we sat in the back there until we got to Koi, and he was flattered. So he just jumped out and he just started bloody punching. So Billy and I ran into the bush. So we came back again, and there he was. He was sitting on top of his car with a case of beers. I said, right, you boys going to behave? Okay, all right, fine. Okay, all right. It was just, I'm just trying to remember. I'm just going to go back. It was so much humor. It just went on and on and on. We bumped into, where was it? What happened? That film, I'm starting, it comes back to me when I've had a few dops. But I'm not having any dops at the moment. So. I can go on and on, but I'll be name dropping big time. So I know it'll come back and kick me in the arse. And there was not a moment of sense, with God. It's still like that today. It doesn't change. Just does not change.
As you said, that friendship, that comradeship is there until the end.
Oh, Willem, it'll never change. It'll never change. We've. I don't think we've ever had a fight or a physical fight. We've had plenty of arguments, but. He's been a good friend. He's been a good friend of my family's too, he's back on Tuesday.
But I don't quite understand. You say he's your biggest mate, but then I heard something else from the day when you were in hospital. I heard another story.
Go on.
Apparently you were in hospital, still in hospital. You'd lost your eye, still the other one's still bandaged. You can see nothing. And these mates of yours, Billy amongst others, come in that one night and they say to you, we're not going to come and visit you anymore. Remember that one?
No, enlighten me. Yeah.
Apparently, you obviously said, how can you do that? I'm lying here all my lonesome and you're the only mates I got. So someone, either James Hayden or Billy Grant or someone told you, nope, we don't see eye to eye with you anymore.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Geez, I used to take abuse. No, shoot. It never ended. Nobody feels sorry for you. That's the thing. Nobody.
Well, I won't mention names. There was another guy, no names, who worked in the armory at one stage, and then apparently he shot himself in the foot, and he ended up in hospital and felt hell of a sorry for himself, and he took ages to recover, while you had so much more wrong with you, and because of your attitude, they say that you recovered pretty quickly for the state you were in. Hey.
Oh yeah, Willem. There's always somebody, especially when you go into hospital, there's always somebody worse off than you. And there were some horrific injuries from that war. And I thought, shit, you've got to get on with life. You've got to carry on. Nobody's going to feel sorry for you. Nobody is going to show you. And I deplore pity. And as I say, I was in, my father was a huge influence in my life. And I saw how he got through after losing both his legs, how he continued. And he was a massive inspiration to, not just to me, to a lot of my mates too, a lot of guys. And his famous words were, if you're up against a bruiser and you're getting knocked about, grin. If you're feeling pretty groggy, and you lick beyond a doubt, grin. Don't let him see you funking. Let him know with every clout that your face is battered to a pulp, your blooming heart is stout. Stand upon your pins until the beggar knocks you out, and grin. I always remember that. My dad used to drum that into me. Yeah.
Torty, on that note, I think we'll call it a night. Thank you very, very much for agreeing to talk to us. I think the listeners have really enjoyed listening to you. I did. And
pleasure, Willem. Good to speak to you again. But I hope it was some sort of contribution. I don't know. It's just keep smiling, my mate, and I hope we see you soon.
No, it's not only a contribution. It's history, and it's important. I think that we talk about it before we start forgetting, isn't it? Before we all die out.
Only the good die young, Willem. You've got a long way to go, my mate.
Yeah, I know. Join the club. Okay, on that note, we'll say thank you and goodbye to Torty. And as usual, we'll think of people that deserve special mention. And tonight, I think we'll ons bring hulde vanaand aan al diegene wat gewond is in hierdie oorlog. Wat gesit het sonder bene, soos Torty se pa, wat dalk 'n oog verloor het, ander liggaamsdele verloor het, en wat tog aangegaan het met hulle lewe, maar wat die res van hulle lewe daarmee sit. Kom ons dink vanaand aan hulle en bring hulde aan hulle en kom ons sluit af.
KSFM op 94.9. KSFM op 94.9.